Hi BookTube, and welcome to a recent Reads wrap-up video. I read 3 books this week. Deb Olin-Unferth's latest novel, Barn 8. William S. Burroughs' The Last Words of Dutch Schultz, which is a reread for me. And Ludwig Wittgenstein, Lectures and Conversations on Aesthetics, Psychology and Religious Belief. So I'm going to start with the Unferth. And I'd read her her novel Vacation, and wasn't really didn't come down one side of the fence or the other. It's certainly well written, some great sort of wordplay and phrasing. But I noticed from Goodreads that other people sort of say her short stories are very good, but she's not a novelist. Well, this disproves that. This was great fun. There's a character called Janie, who's a teenage girl who lives with her mother Olive in New York, but she's always hankering to meet her father, who abandoned her before birth, and she tracks him down to rural Iowa, and she goes and sort of imposes herself upon him. And it's really interesting characterisation, because there are 2 Janies. There's the one who, you know, it's almost like sort of alternative realities or parallel universes. There's the one who might, you know, what would she be like, what would she have developed into if she'd stayed up in New York? But we follow the Janie who goes to Iowa. But she's always referring, in the first third of this book, back and forth between these 2. And I think it's a really interesting effect. It's really well done. But, you know, in rural Iowa, there's not much to do. She gets a job as an auditor of egg-laying farms with a woman called Cleveland, who's older than her. And suddenly Cleveland starts stealing a hen from farms that she's audited. And sort of Janie sort of observes this and helps her. And then she sort of develops this scheme that they're going to do a massive scale direct action on a whole farm of hens, almost like a sort of Dunkirk scale evacuation of hens, up to 900,000 hens on this one particular farm. And that's the setup for the book. The stuff about sort of Janie's twin characterisation sort of drops off considerably, because we get introduced to this whole host of other characters who are going to sort of become involved and plan and run this heist, and Janie and Cleveland lose their prominence in the book to some extent, because we sort of follow this heist. And it's, you know, it's good fun. It's a different tone of book, I felt, from the first third, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And, you know, even the anthropomorphism of the book is again good fun. You know, you could dismiss it out of hand because it's anthropomorphic, but actually in the context of this book, I think it works. And you also learn about, you know, stuff about chickens. You know, most of us probably, what we know about chickens are those sort of in sealed packs in freezers and cool chilled aisles in supermarkets. But this is on actual chickens. You know, we don't, unless you live on a farm or you keep chickens, none of us have any sort of real appreciation of what chickens are, other than, as I say, in these sort of pre-sealed packs. And that's it really. I give this 4.5 stars, and the only reason I didn't give it 5 is because several times during the book Unferth sort of prefigures the outcome of this daring heist long before we get into the night of the heist itself. I don't really understand why she does that, because, you know, by the time we get to the heist, we know how it's going to end. We don't know the details, and we do follow that in the last third of the book. But the tension's not there, because we know ultimately how it's going to end. But, you know, this is well written. It's funny. I'm not sure what it does for the cause of animal rights. I don't think it advances it or hinders it. What you learn is that most of the people involved in this book, in this sort of huge animal rights direct action, is, yeah, they're doing it for the animals, but really they're motivated by all too human reasons of their own lives, of broken relationships and thwarted dreams, and, you know, sort of frustrations at parents and things like that. So I'm not sure that it has any meaning beyond, you know, the world that it establishes. But it was a good fun read, and I enjoyed it. 4.5 stars. And next, let's bring in the man himself. So say hello to the watching BookTube viewers, William. No, don't point your gun at them. Look, we're going to talk about your book, The Last Words of Dutch Schultz. As I say, a reread for me. Yes, I enjoyed it, William. So, Dutch Schultz was a New York bootlegger during Prohibition, gangster, and yeah, you like all that stuff, gangsters and guns, don't you, William? In fact, you were alive and lived through it. Anyway, but Dutch Schultz sort of rather grew too big for his boots and wouldn't play by the agreements of other gangsters, because this is the time when the confederation of sort of mafia types began to sort of come into agreement under Lucky Luciani and Meyer Lansky. But Schultz was too much of a wild card, and in the end he was bumped off by Murder Inc., probably at the down to Luciano and Lansky. And it took him 2 days to die. He was shot in the bathroom of a restaurant, but he didn't die there. He was in hospital for 2 days, and he was delirious, and the cops stationed men at his bed, taking down every word, because they were trying to see if he was going to reveal the names of who'd shot him or any other sort of gangster-related business. So all of that is true, and Burroughs, yeah, that's him, uses those last words of Dutch Schultz. I think it was about 2,000 words in all they got over the 24-hour period or 48-hour period. Burroughs uses that as a springboard for this book, which is written as a film screenplay. And it's not a straight, being Burroughs, takes a bow, Burroughs introduces imagery, outside of the time, to explore his themes of sex and addiction, which, sort of populate all his books. But unlike some of his other novels, which are really sort of Finnegan's Wake, sort of, impenetrability, his early books, this is both accessible and reined in. The imagery is reined in, and it's all of a piece. I think it works really well, and I think it would have made a really interesting film had it ever got shot. Now, I read recently that there's a new release of a Burroughs sort of book written as a film screenplay. I'm not sure, can't remember if it was, I'm just going to look it up. So, yeah, last year, there was a new release of a Burroughs book, which is, again, is done as a film screenplay. It's called Blade Runner. I don't think it's anything to do with the film. But it was so badly sort of trashed in reviews. Yeah, I'm sorry, William. Don't point that gun at me. I didn't review it. I haven't read it. Yeah, I know. Oh dear, I really haven't read it. But it was so sort of trashed by reviewers that I just thought I'd steer clear, because I think this is really good. This is 4 stars, and I didn't sort of want that tarnished by whatever Blade Runner turns out to be. So say goodbye, William. Take your bow, and till next time with him. Okay, and finally, Ludwig Wittgenstein, Lectures and Conversations. And the first thing to say is these are Wittgenstein's words, but this isn't written by him. So this is lecture notes from some of his students from when he was lecturing in Cambridge. And he's lecturing on aesthetics, Freud, and what was the other one? Oh yes, religious belief. And the 2 sections on Freud and religious belief are really sort of one-to-one conversations with his students. And they're very interesting because it's almost like sort of Socratic dialogue, sort of reproduced in them sort of in the phrasing, in the way examples are given and then counters are given, and then there's sort of, Wittgenstein comes back with a sort of a synthesis of, and they, they're sort of really interesting to read. But the one on aesthetics is 5 lectures on the subject of aesthetics, and is, again, very interesting. Now, aesthetics is something I'm interested in, although I can't say I've read about it in a sort of rigorous scientific fashion. Why I'm interested in aesthetics is because I realise that we, the human race, are absolutely governed by pattern and pattern spotting, and I reject that in my own life as much as possible. I mean, inevitably it creeps in, obviously. One can't get away from pattern, but I try and minimise my dependency on pattern and pattern spotting. So I have a sort of an outside interest in aesthetics, which relies on things like harmony and symmetry, and sort of commodiousness of things that your senses take in, and that there might be a mathematical sequence sort of underpinning all of this. So I do have an interest in it, albeit a fairly sceptical one, as applies to me. I'm not saying it's not right, but this is really interesting on quite a lot of that, because what Wittgenstein is saying is that a lot of one's initial reaction to reading a poem or hearing a piece of music or admiring a painting is non-verbal. It's not non-verbal, but it's unlingual. It's like, you might go wow, or sharp intake of breaths, or a shudder or something. It's that it has that effect on you. So that its first recourse is not in words, and these are feelings that you have, almost physical feelings. And Wittgenstein says, well, how do you describe a feeling? How do you define a feeling? And obviously feelings are different in every single person. As our reactions to the same piece of art are going to differ from person to person to person. So Wittgenstein is very much a sort of sceptic himself when it comes to a science of aesthetics. But over and above that, what's really interesting again is this sense of, you get the sense of his students who've effectively written this book based on Wittgenstein's words. You get the sense of you can almost sense them sitting in the lecture hall, writing this down as verbatim as they can, possibly in shorthand, I don't know, but at the same time appending their queries and questions that arrive in the moment of being in that lecture. And I think it's fascinating to see that in the footnotes. So, Wittgenstein's talking about a sort of a Freudian thing where, two guys are walking by the river and one of them pushes the other one in, and he claims that he was just trying to point to something in the distance and accidentally clipped the guy, lost his balance and fell in, versus a Freudian interpretation is, no, the guy who pushed him in, the guy he was talking to said something that reminded him of his father, and he had an instant sort of impulsive and threw him in the river. And Wittgenstein has gone, he hated me because I reminded him of something, and the psychoanalyst statement is then corroborated. But Rees, the guy who's noting down the lecture and has published it here, is how corroborated, ? How in italics, how is this corroborated? And, there's a lot of that sort of questioning, battling with the immensity of the implications of what Wittgenstein's saying. And, that's really sort of eye-opening, I think. And as I say, somehow it conveys, you're not sitting in the lecture hall, but you very much get that sense of as if you were. And just as a final example, there is the tendency to talk about the effect of a work of art, feelings, images, etc. Then it is natural to ask, why do you hear this minuet? And there is a tendency to answer, to get this and that effect. And doesn't the minuet itself matter? Hearing this, would another have done as well? And then in the footnote, does that mean that if you gave a person the effects and removed the picture, it would be all right? Surely the first thing is you see the picture or say the words of a poem. Would a syringe which produces these effects on you do just as well as the picture? So, you really get the sense of minds at work grappling with, this big important stuff, because ultimately it all comes back to the nature of perception and reality and the interplay of those two. And how much are we slaves? How much of our perceptions, which, do they only march to the beat of a sort of hardwired tune where naturally we gravitate towards harmony and assonance and symmetry? Or can you buck the trend, which I'd like to think so, because I try and do that as much as possible, so that we're not hardwired to sort of respond to these things as a knee-jerk reflex. So, if you haven't read Wittgenstein, first of all, you should, especially if you're a writer, because Wittgenstein is probably the most, along with maybe Nietzsche, and obviously Plato and Aristotle, is the most, has the most to contribute to the ideas behind even fiction. The things we write about, these guys have delved into hundreds of years before, we sat down to write. Someone like Samuel Beckett is profoundly influenced by philosophers. So Wittgenstein is really important, but don't start with this. This is a curio. Read his major works and then read this, because it will bring alive or more of a sense of Wittgenstein, the man, than the thinker, because this is much of an ongoing dialogue, or the sense of an ongoing dialogue. So there you have it. That's my reading week, except to say also that I'm delighted to report I've got back into Ducks Newburyport. As I say, I started reading this over Christmas and only got to page 130, which is no reflection on the book because I really enjoyed it. It's a reflection on a mixture of Christmas and the calls on your time, but the fact I was also battling my own work in progress at the time, which ultimately I didn't get finished until March. But I was able to pick this up again this week. I'm now on page 300. I'm not really setting myself a daily or a weekly target. I would just like to get through it, by the time lockdown ends, but we don't know when that's going to be. I can't only read this, restrict myself to exclusive reading of this and nothing else. My need and taste just won't let me do that. So my next book that I'll be reading is The Hall of Singing Caryatids by Victor Pelevin. I think this is his latest book that's been translated into English. I'm a big Pelevin fan. He's a Russian sci-fi Buddhist author, which is an interesting combination. So it's only 100 pages, so it won't take me long to read this. So I shall read this today and tomorrow, and then maybe get back to Ducks Newburyport sort of early next week. Well, having said that, I do have some books that are due to arrive through the mail, which may, in the way that I have, just strike me as I've got to start reading that now. So we'll see. But I'm delighted to say, A, I'm back reading this, and B, the fact that I picked it up 4 months later is not, there's no sort of impediment to that. I'd have to start over again. It is a really enjoyable book. The only obstacle is its length. There are no obstacles of difficulty or accessibility of the writing or the concepts or the time scale. None of that is difficult. It is just the sheer bloody size of this. So there you have it. That's my recent reads for this week. Thanks very much. Till next time.